Have you ever noticed how the most effortless performances hide the most brutal pressure? Andrea Bocelli cannot afford a wrong note. Not because he's a perfectionist, but because his entire identity depends on flawless sound. When you're blind, you can't see people's faces. You can't read their body language. You can't know if they respect you. So the only proof you have is your voice. If that fails, there's nothing left to prove who you are. Most people think his story is about overcoming limitation. But the real question is psychological. What happens when you build your entire sense of self around maintaining extraordinary control in one domain? Stick with me until the end, because what you'll discover is how perfection becomes both sanctuary and prison. To understand the cost, we first need to see how the mechanism was built. When Bocelli lost his vision completely at 12, his brain didn't just adapt, it reconstructed reality. For most people, space is visual, depth, distance, objects. For Bocelli, space became acoustic. Every vibration carries information. Every resonance maps a room. Every texture reveals surface and distance. This isn't poetic language. This is survival. He developed what psychologists call hypervigilant auditory processing. His brain learned to extract navigational data from sound the way most people extract it from sight. But here's where it gets interesting. That same mechanism that helped him navigate the world became the foundation of his vocal mastery. Watch footage of Bocelli in the studio. He makes micro-adjustments constantly. The angle of his head, the shape of his mouth, the tension in his jaw. Most people assume that's artistic preference, but psychologically it's something else. It's the need for total environmental control, because when you can't see the room, you have to become the room. You have to know exactly how your voice will behave in that space before you open your mouth. The mechanism protects him. If he masters sound completely, he cannot be diminished by what he cannot see. Over time, that mastery stops being a skill. It becomes identity. Now observe the stillness before a sustained note. His whole body freezes, not to relax, to eliminate every variable. The inhale, the tension, the angle of his head, all of it controlled. Because in that single breath, there is no room for error. Psychology calls this identity fusion. Bocelli's sense of self merges with the voice. He's no longer a person who sings, he is the singing. The world sees inspiration. He experiences the constant pressure of maintaining the only proof of his worth. Listen to how he describes music in interviews. He doesn't talk about performing it. He talks about experiencing it as an internal architecture, something he inhabits, something he is, not something he does. That distinction matters, because when your identity depends entirely on one domain of excellence, you can't afford to be merely good. You can't afford to be human. And that brings us to the paradox of silence. For most people, silence is rest, a break, a pause, a moment to recover. For Bocelli, silence is the space where control must be absolute. The breath before the note carries everything. If it wavers, the note wavers. If the note wavers, the identity wavers. The psychological cost is this. When your entire sense of self depends on flawless execution, you cannot afford to fail even once. Because failure doesn't just mean a bad performance, it means the collapse of the structure that protects you from vulnerability. And here's the isolation that comes with it. People relate to the product, not the person. They hear the voice, they don't see the man. He becomes less accessible as he becomes more perfect. The better he performs, the harder it becomes for anyone to meet him as a person. So what happens to the parts of him that aren't the voice? They atrophy, or they remain invisible. This is identity foreclosure. The self is reduced to its most exceptional function. The psychological trap is complete. He cannot stop being perfect without losing the structure that protects him from vulnerability. The world celebrates the result. He lives with the relentless internal demand. So what does this reveal about the nature of perfection itself? Bocelli's story isn't about overcoming blindness. It's about the psychological cost of becoming so controlled that you can never afford to fail. Perfection as a defense mechanism creates a self that cannot rest, cannot be ordinary, cannot be seen as anything less than extraordinary. This pattern exists wherever identity fuses with performance. The world heard a miracle. He lived inside a mechanism that could never stop running. If this kind of psychological analysis resonates, subscribe for more case studies that look beneath the surface of extraordinary lives, and join the Discord to discuss the hidden costs of perfection